joining a Masonic lodge in Cambridge, Mass. Isn't that funny? We will officially be the first known couple to join any Masonic lodge anywhere. That sort of blows my mind. The idea came up when the Shriners asked him to consider joining. You see, he was born with severe scoliosis and would have died at the age of 12 had it not been for the free medical care provided by the Shriners. And so he's been a regular pledger for decades now. What we didn't know is that for him to join the Shriners, we would have to join the Masons, because the Shriners is actually the fourth order of Masons. Now, we knew that a friend and colleague in the Boston area is a Mason, as was Reverend Jan Knost, who served here as an interim minister a few years back. So we contacted our friend and learned that he's part of a lodge that is more than 200 years old and one of the most progressive in the nation. Nearly half of their members are gay men, and their average age is decades less than the national average. There's real diversity there. I have to tell you that 25 years ago, I would not have considered joining an all-male secret society. The idea was, frankly, probably not surprising to you, repellent. I worked in the male-dominated and sometimes really toxic field of commercial construction and lived in a predominantly male neighborhood, the Castro in San Francisco. All my friends were men. I needed women and children and non-binary folks in my life. And that's one of the biggest reasons that I joined the local UU congregation. But the maleness of the Masons wasn't the problem. Honestly, with so much of my life these days lived in feminine spaces, it's kind of nice to be in the company of just guys now and then. The problem, though, was that in order to join, I would have to profess a belief in God. And 25 years ago, there's no way that I could have done that, honestly. You see, I grew up in the Roman Catholic Church during a time when the common refrain was, this isn't a salad bar. You can't pick and choose your beliefs. You have to buy the whole thing or nothing at all. And the message of my catechism teachers at the time was, well, and the priest, frankly, was a little more dramatic. If you don't buy it all, then you're an atheist. I didn't believe in an all-knowing, all-powerful God, because I didn't believe that that guy would allow suffering and oppression and even hell. It didn't make sense to me. My idea was completely different from what I was being taught. But being a kid, I couldn't even begin to articulate it. And if I had been able to, I would have been told by everyone around me that I was wrong. Maybe even evil, I feared. So I kept my mouth shut and accepted that I was an atheist. I was okay with that. But my beliefs have changed really dramatically. A few weeks ago, I introduced you to the existence of process theology and a teeny tiny bit about how it evolved from a dense and intensely academic philosophical system of mathematician Alfred North Whitehead into a functional theology that can be applied to any religion or no religion at all. That Sunday morning, we literally made together the God that I now believe in, a non-anthropomorphic, energetic force in which all sentient beings play a part in the endless system of destruction and creation. I said then that process theology is incredibly dense and impossible to convey in just one service. The truth is, though, that everything I say, everything I do is so infused with process theology that I can't separate myself from it. Everything I say is process. So today, I want to share just a tiny bit of process thought with you. In 2003, I started seminary where I thought I'd be learning about philosophy and ethics, UU history, and a whole lot about community organizing. But UU theologies was a required course, and I was resistant to the idea of studying theology, but Emerson and Thoreau and other Unitarians and Universalists in history had a lot to say, I found out, that made a lot of sense to me. And they called it theology. They woke me up to the idea that we all have ideas about truth. And even though we express them differently, we're all worthy. They're all worthy. All those things that we believe are worthy as little small parts of the great mystery. Then I learned about process and discovered that theologians of the Abrahamic faiths didn't have a monopoly on theology, that it's actually something much more expansive than just those three religions. And as soon as we started getting into the tenets of process, I just got it. It was like Nick with Gestalt. I just got it. It was one of those moments when I felt like I'd found that which I'd been hunting for in vain. I'd found my people, a group of thinkers who could articulate everything that I couldn't articulate up to that point. It instantly made sense to me. And the more I learned, the more I discovered about myself. More importantly, how I saw the world and my place in it, that's what really changed dramatically. So in process theology, moments are really important. In fact, one could say that the only real thing is a moment. And a moment is smaller than a second. In the second that it takes to say 1/1000, there are 4 syllables, 10 sounds, 14 letters, and countless moments, each imperceptibly tiny. They're so tiny that they die as they are born, so that life and death are one and the same. And a single moment can be completely uneventful, like sitting in a chair in an empty room, sitting on a rock. Or that moment can be completely transformative for the whole universe, like, I don't know, a spark that ignites an explosion that creates a universe. How's that for a powerful moment? Now imagine one moment of your life, any moment in which you're seeing someone you love, or painting, or drawing, or, I don't know, eating a persimmon. And at the same time, 8 billion other people on the planet are also each having a moment. And that's only the people. Add to that all the other living things like algae and insects, house pets, wildlife, every species of bird out into space, to the edges of the ever-expanding universe. More moments are happening at once than any of us are even capable of imagining. And no living thing exists in solitude, so we're all related to everyone else, directly or indirectly. So put all of those experiences, all of those actions of every single living thing together, every being that has ever existed. And in process theology, that's God. That means it's something so tiny, so short-lived that its birth and death are the same thing, is also so expansive that it encompasses the universe. And moments are also important because that's where concrescence happens. How's that for a 50-cent word? Concrescence is when everything from the past comes together to determine the future. So everything from the past comes together in a moment to project out into the future. And as more and more of the past is brought into a moment, greater and greater possibilities exist for the future. And sentient beings have a choice in bringing the past into the future. So now imagine you've spent your whole life sitting in one protected spot, like sitting on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and you're doing nothing but thinking. You don't have to worry about feeding yourself or providing for yourself because someone else does it. Everything just appears as if by magic, and you never have to engage with another living, thinking soul. You don't ruminate about the past or worry about the future because they mean nothing to you. All you know is being in that spot. You only have that place in that moment you are living in, moment after moment. So no past, no future. You can't imagine being anywhere else or doing anything else because you're oblivious to it all. Like a rock sitting in the same remote location for millennia. Now that might sound like a kind of bliss, especially these days. But the problem with that is that you have no role in creating the future. But if you're engaged in the world, say you're making a living, raising a family, your future holds more potential because you know about at least your own past and your family's past. But it's still limited to your experiences. And yet it's still more than just a rock sitting there. And if you really engage in understanding the past, not just your past and your family's past, but as much of history as you can possibly understand, the whole of existence since the beginning of the universe, the more you can project into the future. And if you could know the entirety of history, you would be the greatest prophet who ever lived, because you'd be able to see exactly where it's all going. And you'd have great power in determining the direction of the future. Now, as I said, each of us is no more than the sum of our experiences. It would take knowing and understanding the experiences of everyone alive and everyone and everything that has ever lived to have full knowledge. And of course, that's impossible. But the more open you are to understanding the connection between all sentient beings, the more creative you can be in forging the future. So that means that together we're all very powerful because we all bring a piece of the truth and a bit of history with us. In a way that everything comes together, that it concresses into the moment and projects into the future. The way the past dies and the future is born in a microscopic period of time. That to me is God. This endless cycle of destruction and creation that is exactly what everything up to that moment has led to. It's inevitable, yet completely changeable in the future. And that's God to me. That means that I'm God, that you're God, that we're God. It's all God. And we make each other, we're affected by each other, and even are indistinguishable from each other. So it sounds a little Buddhist and a little bit Taoist and a little bit Hindu, doesn't it? And maybe it even sounds like the mystics of Judaism and Christianity and Islam. And that's why process theology is applicable to so many different faiths and belief systems. Now, I may not use the word God very often, but when I'm asked if I believe in God, as the leaders of the Masonic Lodge have asked, that's the God I think of. That's the God that I believe in. It makes sense to me now the way it made sense to me before I even had the words for describing it. And I don't have to spend a whole lot of time rationalizing or second guessing myself when I'm asked if I believe in God. I don't even have to dwell on the differences in belief. When someone uses the word God, I can ask them what they mean by it. Maybe they'll affect my beliefs and maybe not. But I know that together, our different understandings add to the knowledge of the past in a way that allows us greater potential for the future. And that to me is incredibly empowering to have that which you know be articulated by someone else in a way that you never would have thought of, and in a way that changes you. What that means to me is that we aren't alone, that other people have had the same thoughts or similar thoughts and have the intellectual power, the time, and the resources to work it out, to figure out those systems and to even name them. But it's also a big responsibility, knowing that we can't do anything about the past, but we can change the future if we understand as much as we can about our shared past. Finding the philosophy that resonates for you is to find a place to belong intellectually, spiritually. But that doesn't mean the work is done. Certainty can be deadly. Doubt can be isolating. And maybe both things can be both. But living in the in-between place, this place with each other, this is a faithful rebellion, as Aaron Lane calls it. It means that each of us has to know what we know, but be open to having our hearts and our minds changed. Now, after hearing all of this, you may agree with me. You probably don't. And that's okay. I don't feel the need to force an aha moment on anyone, the kind of moment that I experienced in seminary that changed my future and my experience of the great mystery that we call life. What matters to me is that we're on the journey together, that we're living each moment, that we're sharing our stories, learning more about the history that got all of us here now as we seek to create change in the world. What matters is that we're welcoming, we're loving, we're growing spiritually and seeking justice together. I call that God. You can call that whatever you want. And I want to hear about that. Maybe so. So please rise now.